Hey everyone, my name is Antonio Alonzo, and for my presentation, I chose Joshua Rothman's review. And it's pretty much what Gone Girl is really about by Joshua Rothman, and is also published by the New Yorker 2014. So, what I really like about this review is that Rothman doesn't just describe the movie, he really analyzes and actually takes time to really think about how David Fincher's film is changing how Gillian Films' novel was. He really takes a lot of time to really go in detail and think about everything. You know, with that, he also starts to see how Gone Girl is not just a mystery of thriller, but it's more than that. It's way more than that. For him, it's about identity, control, and even how people perform roles for relationships. So in this presentation, I'll be explaining how Rothman's main ideas, how he compares to the novel and the film, and I'll even share my ideas, what I personally think about his review, if I agree, disagree, what is good and what is not. So let's go to slide 2. So here I'm talking about why Rothman is even arguing about Gone Girl, why he even wants to argue about it. So first off, Rothman's biggest point is that Fincher completely changes the tone of Flint's story. In the book, we hear both that Nick and Amy's voices are feeling so emotional and realistic, but in the movie, Fincher kind of changes it to make it seem more cold, distant, and not really close with each other. With that, Rothman starts to even say that the film turns the marriage into a performance. Both Nick and Amy act like a perfect couple. They're acting like a perfect couple for the media instead of trying to be honest with each other like a couple would. Instead of trying to fix things with each other, make it work, they're not. They're acting like they're putting this act to be seen as a perfect couple. He also starts to compare that Gone Girl to Fight Club. Rothman starts to say how both these films kind of expose the myths of how people live by. For example, in Fight Club, the myth is about masculinity. And in Gone Girl, it's the myth of having a perfect relationship, having a perfect marriage, having a perfect wife, having a perfect husband. So basically, what Rothman is trying to say is everything looks perfect on the surface, Everything's looking perfect on the surface, but underneath it all, it's all fake. And it's all just a lie. Just two people who are pretending to just be for control and image. Now let's go to the third one. The third one, I'm going to be talking about the genre, the form, and the adaptation on Rothman's review. So, Rothman starts to talk about how Fincher kind of changes the story's genre and form. He starts to say it's not just a thriller, but it's actually more of a physiological drama. It starts to talk about gender, roles, control, and even about media. In the novel, we can see how Flynn kind of switches these between the characters, He starts to put the characters in both perspectives. Whereas in the movie, Fincher kind of replaces that with actual visuals. We actually get to see what's happening and kind of unfold. It unfolds to us and actually, instead of reading about them, we're actually visualizing them. From there on, this kind of shifts the tone too, It really does shift the tone a lot. Because the book kind of feels very emotional and detailed, but the film kind of feels kind of sharp and detached. It's not as close or as good as the book is. As Rothman kind of believes that's what makes it powerful, though. Rothman believes it kind of forces us to analyze the relationship more instead of trying to connect to it emotionally. For him, adaptation kind of means transformation. Fincher didn't just copy the book, but he kind of turned it into something more and something completely different. Okay, now let's go to slide 4. My response. So my response to Rothman's review is, yes, I agree a lot with Rothman is saying, especially how he talks about how Fincher kind of shows the dark side of marriage. But I do think Rothman overlooks that emotion, He overlooks that emotion that is still there. The movie does feel cold, but that's intentional. It's happening for a reason. It's Fincher's way of us making feel uncomfortable and really thinking about it. But we do feel that tension, though. We do feel the tension through that silence, through the body language, and even through that control. And yeah, so I do agree with Rothman, and I do think while Rothman is right that Fincher kind of changes his tone, I do think he misses that Fincher is still exploring emotion. It's just more colder and more manipulative, kind of. Okay, now let's go to slide 5. Slide 5 is basically the conclusion. So overall, I will say Rothman's review helped me understand a lot about what adaptation really means. Fincher doesn't really just retell Flynn's novel, but it actually helps reshape it. It helps make the movie turn something more emotional and realistic into something more symbolic and even unsettling. But don't get me wrong, both the book and the film are dealing with lies, identity, and even control. But I do feel like Fincher makes those ideas more sharper and make it more colder by removing that emotion and showing people how perform love is. With that, Rothman really did help me see that adaptation isn't supposed to be copied, but it's supposed to be reinterpreted. So, in the end, I will say Gone Girl did show truth. It does show the truth of love and even identity can be all performances. It can show how love and all that can all be a lie. It can be a fake facade of people do just for media. But you know what? That's what makes it such a strong and a very disturbing story. With that, I really did love this book. Great movie too. And I'm really happy we did this. So thank you for listening.